In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where the stars burned cold and silent, the Galactic Council convened in the heart of their massive space station. This was no ordinary meeting. The members, an elite group of beings from across the galaxy, were gathering to discuss the fate of a planet that had, until now, been insignificant in the eyes of the Empire. That planet was Earth. For centuries, it had remained isolated, shielded from the greater conflicts of the galaxy. But recently, a disturbance had been noticed. Earth, once a planet on the edge of oblivion, was rapidly advancing in ways that caught the attention of the Empire's best spies. Their technology was progressing at an alarming rate, and their people were learning to harness the potential of space travel. It was clear, Earth was no longer just a speck in the cosmic landscape. The Empire's analysts predicted that, in just a few decades, Earth would become a significant threat. They feared that if the humans were allowed to grow unchecked, they might challenge the very foundation of galactic rule. The Council, consisting of powerful and ancient beings, some covered in shimmering armor, others made of pure energy, sat in their massive chamber. Their faces, if one could call them faces, were unreadable, for these beings were not like humans. They were wise beyond measure, but also cold, calculating, and merciless. After an hour of deliberation, the decision was final. Earth would have to be neutralized. The humans were still weak, but their rapid growth meant that if they were allowed to thrive, the entire balance of power would be threatened. "Send our best," the Grand Speaker of the Council intoned. His voice reverberated through the chamber, a sound that seemed to vibrate within the very bones of the listeners. "We shall send our most skilled assassins to Earth. Let them be the ones to end this threat before it becomes too great." The room fell silent, the weight of the decision sinking in. These were no ordinary assassins, but the finest the Empire had to offer. Beings genetically engineered for speed, stealth, and lethal precision. Each one was a master of their craft, capable of slipping in and out of a planet's defenses without leaving a trace. The assassins would strike swiftly, removing Earth's leaders and sowing chaos in their wake. The human race would crumble under the weight of its own confusion, never realizing what had hit them. Far below, in the depths of Earth's atmosphere, on a quiet street in the heart of Japan, Ryu Tanaka, an unassuming man of average height and build, was practicing his ancient craft. He had been trained since childhood in the ways of the ninja, an art that had been forgotten by most of the world. His skill with the katana was unmatched. His movements were fluid, and his mind was as sharp as the blade he wielded. He had lived in the shadows for years, away from the world's prying eyes. But as the Galactic Empire's best assassins prepared to descend on Earth, fate had chosen him to be humanity's silent guardian. For Ryu, the summons came without warning. One night, as he meditated in the small, humble dojo he had inherited from his father, a figure cloaked in shadows appeared before him. The figure did not speak at first. It simply placed a small, glowing orb on the floor, a device that, when activated, would deliver a message. Ryu touched the orb, and immediately a projection of a woman's face appeared in the air before him. Her eyes were cold, calculating, her features calm but stern. She was the commander of Earth's defense forces, and she had a message for him. "The Empire is coming," she said in a voice that carried the weight of many lives depending on her words. "They've sent their best assassins. You are Earth's only hope." Ryu's heart skipped a beat, not from fear, but from the realization that the time had come. The time for humanity to stand up for itself had arrived. The woman continued, telling him of the Empire's plan, how their assassins would infiltrate key government locations, how they would eliminate Earth's leaders without a single soul noticing. They would strike in the dead of night, using weapons and technology far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. There would be no warning, no chance to fight back. It would be a slaughter. But Ryu, who had spent his life training in silence, knew that there was always a way to counter an enemy, no matter how powerful. He had learned the ways of the ninja, not just as a form of combat, but as a philosophy. stealth, precision, the ability to strike when the enemy least expects it. The Empire's assassins may have advanced technology, but they lacked the one thing that humans held dear: creativity, ingenuity, and the ability to adapt. As he listened to the message, Ryu's thoughts drifted back to his childhood, to the long hours spent honing his skills in the art of invisibility. He thought of his father, who had taught him that the true power of a ninja was not just in the blade but in the mind. He thought of the countless nights he had spent meditating, learning to control his breath, to calm his thoughts, to remain unseen in the midst of chaos. It was that training, that discipline, that would allow him to defeat an enemy that was far more advanced than anything he had ever faced. The projection of the woman flickered, signaling that her message was ending. "They are coming soon. We need you. Ryu, the fate of Earth rests in your hands." The orb deactivated, and the room was plunged back into darkness. Ryu stood in silence for a moment, his mind racing with the weight of the task ahead. He knew the Empire would not be easy to defeat. Their assassins were unlike anything Earth had ever encountered. Beings capable of vanishing in the blink of an eye, moving faster than the human eye could track. But Ryu had something they did not. He had the ancient wisdom of his ancestors, the training passed down through generations of ninja. And most importantly, he had the will to protect his planet. He began to prepare. His heart was calm, his mind sharp. Ryu understood that this was only the beginning. The war for Earth's survival was about to begin. The assassins would come, but they would not find Earth an easy target. Ryu would ensure that. The shadow of the Galactic Empire would fall on Earth, but humanity, guided by the silent, unseen strength of one ninja, would rise to meet it. As Ryu stepped into the night, ready to face the unknown, the first whispers of the Empire's assassins began to stir on Earth's surface. The countdown had begun, and Ryu, the last ninja, was ready. The moon hung low over the sprawling city of Tokyo, its pale light reflecting off the glass and steel of the towering skyscrapers. It was a quiet night, but beneath the calm surface, something dark was stirring. The Empire's assassins had arrived. They were no longer shadows in the galaxy. They were now shadows on Earth. The planet had no idea what was coming, and it would not know until it was too late. The assassins, expertly trained and prepared for every eventuality, had infiltrated Earth's defenses with disturbing ease. Their technology, far superior to anything Earth had seen, gave them the advantage. For weeks, they had been studying Earth's movements, learning its weaknesses, and identifying its leaders. The time to strike had come. In the silence of his small dojo, Ryu Tanaka sat in the dark, meditating, waiting for the first sign. He had been aware of the looming threat ever since the commander's message, but now the moment had arrived. Earth was no longer just a target in the galaxy. It was about to face the fury of the Empire. As he focused, the faintest ripple in the air caused his senses to flare to life. Something was wrong. He stood up, his movements swift and purposeful, like a shadow gliding across the floor. He was no stranger to danger. But this was different. The assassins had arrived, and they were coming for him. Ryu, still riding the high of his previous victories, did not immediately realize the scale of what was coming. He had been in constant motion, tracking the assassins' movements and slipping through the city's shadowed corners. It was his way of fighting, moving unseen, a whisper among the noise. But that night, something felt different. The air was thick with an unnatural tension, as if the very ground beneath his feet was bracing for impact. As he stepped out into the streets, he felt the change, though he couldn't yet pinpoint its cause. Then came the flash. The explosion rocked the ground beneath him, sending debris flying into the air. Ryu's instincts kicked in immediately. His body twisted in midair as he leaped behind a nearby building for cover, the blast nearly knocking him off his feet. He could feel the heat of the explosion on his skin, the shockwave reverberating through the ground. He peered around the corner, his eyes scanning the chaos, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The city was under attack. It wasn't just one blast. It was a series of them, hitting key infrastructure all over Tokyo. The Empire had launched their counteroffensive, and they had done so with terrifying precision. Buildings crumbled to dust, fires raged in every direction, and the streets were filled with people running for their lives. Ryu's heart raced, but his mind remained focused. He knew that this wasn't a random attack. This was a statement. The Empire wasn't just striking to cause damage. They were sending a message. And the message was clear. We are not to be underestimated. Ryu had faced individual assassins before, but this was something far worse. This was an army, a force capable of overwhelming the entire planet. As he moved through the wreckage, his mind raced. Where was the enemy? The assassins were skilled, but they were nothing compared to the force now descending upon the city. Ryu realized he was no longer fighting a few elite soldiers. He was fighting the full might of the Empire itself. He moved swiftly through the debris, his eyes scanning every corner for any signs of movement. The city had become a war zone, and Ryu was at its heart. Every building was a potential danger, every alleyway a place where an enemy could be waiting. His ninja training, honed over years of discipline, was now his only weapon in the face of overwhelming odds. He had to stay calm, keep his wits about him, and outthink the enemy, just as he always had. As he navigated the ruins, Ryu's thoughts turned to the people of Earth. They were not ready for a battle of this scale. They were just beginning to realize the true power of the Empire. And Ryu knew that without him, they would be crushed. The assassins had been a warning, but now the full force of the Empire was showing its hand. Their ships hovered in the sky, massive warships that could decimate entire cities with a single blast. Ryu didn't have the luxury of time. The Empire would not stop. They would continue to attack until Earth was nothing but a memory. But Ryu was no ordinary man. He had always known that his role was greater than just defending his home. He had been chosen for this moment, and the moment had arrived. He knew what he had to do. He climbed to the rooftop of a nearby building, taking in the full scale of the destruction. The warships above were launching strikes, and the sky was filled with the sound of their weapons firing. Ryu's eyes narrowed. He could see the Empire's forces deploying on the ground now. Armored soldiers, heavy artillery, and drones. They were spreading out across the city, taking control with frightening speed. Ryu's mind raced as he formulated a plan. If he was to stop them, he had to strike at the heart of the Empire's operation. He moved quickly, moving from rooftop to rooftop, always staying hidden in the shadows. His senses were heightened, every sound in the city magnified. The faint hum of the drones in the sky, the distant cries of the civilians running for their lives. It all blended into a chaotic symphony that Ryu had learned to tune out. His focus was laser-sharp. He had to reach the center of the Empire's invasion force, where they were coordinating their attack. There, he would find the key to stopping it all. Sound. Ryu didn't hesitate. The others would be on him in moments. He had to escape before they could regroup. He moved like a whisper through the night, vanishing into the shadows, leaving the Empire's assassins confused and enraged. The first strike had been successful, but Ryu knew this was only a small skirmish. The real battle was only beginning. The Empire's assassins would come again, stronger and more prepared. But Ryu had already proven something important. Earth would not fall without a fight. And Ryu Tanaka, the last of the ninjas, would make sure they knew that. The city was buzzing with panic. The first wave of attacks had left a trail of chaos, but the true danger had only just begun. Ryu Tanaka could feel it. The air was thick with tension, and every step he took echoed with the weight of impending conflict. The Empire's assassins had learned from their mistakes. They were no longer underestimating him. The cat-and-mouse game had turned into something more dangerous. The assassins were hunting him now, not just as individuals, but as a collective force. They had learned to move as one, to adapt to Ryu's unpredictable methods. No longer were they the silent shadows that slipped through unnoticed. They had come for him in full force, and they would not stop until they had eliminated their target. Ryu had to act fast. His small victories had only given him temporary respite, but he knew that each moment brought him closer to the moment of reckoning. He couldn't afford to stay in one place for too long. The Empire's assassins were relentless, their technology allowing them to track even the slightest irregularity in the air, the faintest disturbance in the atmosphere. They could see him coming from miles away, their advanced optics scanning every inch of the city for signs of his presence. Ryu, however, had trained for years to exist without being seen. He moved through the city like a shadow, blending with the night, aware that any misstep would be his last. The first real confrontation came when he was tracking a lead, another one of the Empire's operatives, this time disguised as a civilian. Ryu had spotted the telltale signs of a false identity: the unnatural calm, the stiff posture, and the slight hesitation in the man's movements. He knew it was one of the assassins. As Ryu followed him down a narrow alleyway, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Something wasn't right. He didn't feel the usual pulse of danger that came with facing an enemy. Instead, the air seemed to hum with an unsettling quietness. It was then that the trap sprung. Before Ryu could react, the alley was filled with the unmistakable sound of boots hitting the ground in perfect unison. Figures emerged from the shadows, 3 of them. At first glance, they looked human, but Ryu could sense the difference. Their movements were too precise, too controlled, as if they were following a script written by someone else. The assassins were not just warriors. They were machines, human bodies enhanced with technology that made them faster, stronger, and more dangerous than any man could be on his own. The first assassin lunged at him with a blinding speed, a silver blade flashing in the moonlight. Ryu barely had time to react, instinctively ducking beneath the attack and flipping to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike. But the assassin didn't miss a beat. It was as if he had expected Ryu to dodge, and without hesitation, he pivoted on his heel and came at him again, this time from a different angle. Ryu's eyes narrowed. The assassin was fast, faster than any normal human, but Ryu had something that technology could not replicate. The assassin was predictable. His moves were calculated, but they lacked the fluidity of a true fighter. Ryu stepped forward, closing the gap between them in a flash. His hand shot out, grabbing the assassin's wrist in a vice-like grip. The assassin's eyes widened, but before he could react, Ryu twisted, using the man's momentum against him. A quick strike to the back of the neck sent the assassin crashing to the ground, unconscious. Ryu didn't pause to celebrate. He knew this was only the beginning. The second assassin came at him from behind, but Ryu was already moving. His body was a blur of motion, his feet dancing across the ground as he spun to face the new threat. This time, he didn't wait for the assassin to make the first move. He attacked, his katana slicing through the air with deadly precision. The blade met the assassin's armored forearm with a sharp clang, sending a jolt of energy through Ryu's arm. The assassin was strong, his body enhanced with layers of metal that made him nearly impervious to conventional attacks. But Ryu was no ordinary fighter. He knew that strength alone wasn't enough to win a battle. In a single fluid motion, Ryu ducked beneath the assassin's counterattack and swept his leg out, knocking the assassin off balance. Before the man could regain his footing, Ryu was already on top of him, pressing the point of his katana against the assassin's throat. The assassin froze, his eyes locked onto Ryu's, but Ryu didn't kill him. Instead, he knocked him out with a single blow to the temple. The second assassin fell to the ground, unconscious, as Ryu moved on to the next one. But as Ryu turned, he realized his mistake. There was no third assassin. The air around him suddenly seemed to shift. The shadows that had been his allies moments before were now closing in, wrapping around him like a vice. A voice echoed from all around him, low and distorted, as though it were coming from inside his head. "You think you've won?" The voice asked, almost amused. "You're playing a game you cannot win. Ryu Tanaka. We are everywhere. Ryu's eyes darted around, but he couldn't pinpoint the source of the voice. The air was thick with a strange energy, and suddenly he realized the trap wasn't just physical. The assassins were using something he hadn't anticipated, a technology that allowed them to become invisible, to mask their presence completely. It was then that Ryu understood. The Empire had upped the stakes. They weren't just sending enhanced warriors. They were sending hunters. These were no longer assassins working individually. They were a collective, using their technology to become a single, unified force. They could communicate in silence, move as one, and anticipate Ryu's every move before he made it. Ryu closed his eyes, centering himself. He had to rely on what he knew best: his training, his instincts. The ninja had never relied on technology. They had always used their surroundings, their minds, and their bodies to outsmart their enemies. If the assassins had become invisible, then Ryu would have to become something even more elusive. With a deep breath, Ryu stood still, his body tense. He closed off all distractions and focused on the smallest details, the faintest movement in the air, the slight disturbance in the flow of energy around him. The assassins, invisible though they might be, were still there. He could sense them. Then, without warning, he struck. His movements were swift and precise, a blur of action as he lunged into the darkness, his katana slicing through the air. There was a moment of tension, and then a sharp cry echoed in the night. One of the assassins had miscalculated. Ryu's blade had found its mark. The remaining assassins recoiled, realizing too late that they had underestimated their opponent. Ryu, the last ninja, had once again turned the tables. But even as they regrouped, Ryu knew this battle was far from over. They would be back, stronger, smarter, and more prepared. And when they came again, he would be ready. The clash of shadows had only just begun. The silence of the night was shattered by the sound of engines roaring through the sky. High above the city, the Empire's fleet descended, vast and menacing, blotting out the stars. They had been watching Ryu, learning from every encounter, and now they were ready to make their move. The first wave had failed. The assassins had underestimated Earth's last ninja, but this time, the Empire was prepared. They would not make the same mistake twice. The first strike came without warning, like the flash of a blade in the dark. The assassins moved with terrifying speed, slipping into high-security government buildings and military installations, eliminating key figures with surgical precision. They left no trace of their presence, no sign that a battle had taken place. The Empire's assassins were masters of their craft, invisible ghosts who operated in the shadows. The world awoke to chaos the next morning. News outlets buzzed with reports of mysterious deaths and unexplained disappearances. Governments scrambled to figure out what had happened, but no one had answers. In the midst of the confusion, Earth's military forces were helpless. They had no idea who their enemy was or how to fight back. It was a perfect plan, until the first mistake was made. Ryu knew it wouldn't take long for the assassins to find their next target. The Empire's strategy was simple: strike fast, strike hard, and leave the world in disarray. But Ryu had been trained for this moment his entire life. He wasn't just some soldier or ordinary man. He was a ninja, a master of stealth and deception. He had spent years honing his mind and body to become the perfect weapon, a weapon that didn't rely on advanced technology, but on ancient wisdom and unyielding discipline. He knew the Empire's assassins would not be easy to defeat, but he also knew that they could be outwitted. Their overconfidence would be their downfall. As Ryu slipped into the streets of Tokyo, he moved with the speed and silence of a ghost. His eyes scanned every corner, every shadow. He knew the Empire's assassins would be everywhere, hidden in plain sight. They would blend into the crowds, using technology to mask their presence. But Ryu had something they didn't, a mind trained to notice the smallest of details. He knew that even the most advanced technology had weaknesses, and it was those weaknesses he would exploit. His first target appeared as a flicker in his vision. An odd disturbance among the crowd. It was a man, dressed in the uniform of a high-ranking military officer, moving with too much purpose, too much precision. Ryu's eyes narrowed. This was no ordinary soldier. This was one of the Empire's assassins, disguised to blend in. The man's movements were controlled, almost mechanical, his eyes scanning the crowd for his next target. Ryu knew he had to act quickly. With a quiet step, he closed the distance between them. The assassin never saw him coming. Ryu's hand moved like lightning, grabbing the assassin by the arm and pulling him into a nearby alley. The assassin struggled, but Ryu's grip was like iron. Within seconds, he had incapacitated the man, pinning him to the ground with precise strikes that would leave no mark but would render the man unconscious. Ryu's heart raced, but his mind remained calm. He knew this was just the beginning. The assassins would come in waves, and he would have to stay one step ahead. As Ryu dragged the unconscious assassin into the shadows, his thoughts raced. The first strike had been successful, but it was just a small victory in a much larger war. The Empire's assassins were not mere killers. They were strategists, trained to anticipate every move, every counterattack. They would not make the same mistake twice. Ryu knew the next phase of the battle would be even more dangerous. He had to act quickly, or the city would be lost. But just as he was about to slip away, a voice echoed in the alley. It was low and distorted, coming from a hidden speaker. "You think you can stop us, little ninja?" The voice was cold, emotionless, like a machine. "You are nothing compared to what we are. You will fall, just like the others." Ryu froze. He could feel the presence of others closing in on him, hidden just out of sight. The Empire's assassins were not just individuals. They were a network, a team working in perfect synchronization. Ryu had underestimated them. They had known he would come for them. They had set a trap. The alley around him seemed to grow darker, as if the shadows themselves were closing in. Ryu's senses flared. He had only seconds to act. Without hesitation, he pulled the unconscious assassin into a hidden corner, using his body as a shield. Just as the first figure emerged from the shadows, Ryu sprang into action. His movements were a blur, faster than the eye could follow. He used the environment to his advantage, throwing himself off walls, flipping over obstacles, and using his surroundings to keep the assassins at bay. The first assassin lunged at him, but Ryu was already gone, his body a phantom in the night. He moved behind the attacker, striking with the speed of a serpent, disabling the man with a swift, calculated strike to the back of the neck. The assassin crumpled to the ground without a. As Ryu neared the heart of the Empire's operation, he spotted movement in the distance. Several soldiers in combat armor were making their way toward a command center, a fortified building that looked like the nerve center of the invasion. Ryu's eyes flickered to the sky above. Another ship was descending, its sleek, deadly form cutting through the clouds. His instincts told him it was a high-ranking officer's craft, likely carrying the mastermind behind the invasion. This was his chance. Without a second thought, Ryu moved into action. He dropped from the rooftop, landing silently on the ground below. The soldiers in the area hadn't seen him yet. He took advantage of their distracted state, moving swiftly toward them, each step a calculated move. He slipped between shadows, staying low to the ground. The soldiers were getting closer to the command center, but they had no idea he was following them. As they entered the building, Ryu knew it was time. He could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of the confrontation that was about to unfold. He followed them inside, blending into the shadows once again. Inside, the command center was a flurry of activity. The Empire's officers were busy coordinating their attacks, their voices barely audible over the hum of technology. Ryu took a deep breath and waited. He could sense the leader, the one pulling the strings, somewhere in the heart of the command center. His hand tightened around the hilt of his katana. This was his moment. The Empire had pushed too far, and now they would pay for it. As Ryu moved through the building, he encountered several more soldiers, but they were no match for him. He moved with the precision of a predator, taking them out one by one, his katana a blur of motion. The soldiers, for all their training and technology, were no match for Ryu's ancient skills. They were too focused on their mission to notice the silent ninja slipping through their ranks. Finally, he reached the inner sanctum, where the Empire's leader stood, surrounded by guards. The leader, a tall, imposing figure clad in dark armor, turned as Ryu entered, his eyes narrowing with recognition. "So the little ninja thinks he can stop us," the leader said, his voice low and calm, as if he were discussing a minor inconvenience. "You've caused us trouble, but this is where it ends." Ryu didn't respond. He couldn't afford to waste words. His katana flashed in the dim light of the command center, and before the leader could react, Ryu was upon him. The battle was fierce, but in the end, the leader was no match for the ninja's speed and skill. In a final, swift strike, Ryu brought the leader to the ground. As the Empire's invasion force began to falter without their leader, Ryu knew this was only a temporary victory. The Empire would regroup, and they would retaliate. But for now, Earth had a chance. Ryu had shown them that they could fight back, that they weren't helpless in the face of overwhelming force. And as the chaos continued around him, Ryu disappeared into the shadows once again, waiting for the next battle to come. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting its first rays onto the shattered streets of the city below. The fires that had once consumed buildings were now just smoldering embers. The sound of distant explosions had faded, replaced by the eerie silence of a city that had survived the impossible. Ryu Tanaka stood at the edge of a rooftop, his eyes scanning the horizon. The world had changed overnight. The battle for Earth was far from over, but there was a new hope in the air. He could feel it, deep within him, the beginning of a new dawn. It had been days since the final clash in the Empire's command center. The city, though scarred, had not fallen. The invaders had underestimated Earth's resilience. The Empire's leadership had been shattered with the death of their commander, and without their centralized force, their operations had crumbled. Earth's defenses had taken the opportunity to strike back, pushing the enemy forces into retreat. For the first time since the war began, the humans were no longer on the defensive. Ryu's actions had turned the tide, and the Empire, despite its vast power, had found itself facing an enemy it hadn't expected, a planet united in defiance. In the aftermath of the battle, Earth's governments came together, coordinating a global effort to restore order. The chaos of the invasion had revealed fractures in their societies, but it had also forged a new unity. Nations that had once been at odds now shared resources and intelligence, working side by side to rebuild their shattered world. The people, inspired by the heroism of Ryu and the courage of the common citizen, found strength in their newfound unity. Yet, even as the world began to heal, Ryu knew it was not over. The Empire was still out there, and they would not forget their humiliation so easily. The victory was a temporary one, and the Empire would be back, stronger, smarter, and more prepared. But for now, Earth had gained something far more important: time. Time to rebuild, time to adapt, and time to prepare for the war that was still to come. As Ryu moved through the streets, he could sense the changes around him. People no longer looked at him as a shadowy figure moving through the night. He was no longer just a ninja. He had become a symbol. The citizens had seen him face impossible odds and emerge victorious. He had given them hope when they had none. He had shown them that even in the darkest of times, the strength of the human spirit could triumph over any force. Yet, Ryu felt the weight of it all. The city may have been saved, but the war was far from won. He knew that the Empire would regroup. They would learn from their mistakes, and next time, they would come with everything they had. Ryu had prepared himself for this moment, but even he couldn't deny the toll it had taken on him. The endless battles, the constant evasion, the fear of failure, it had all left its mark. As he walked through the city's central square, He noticed the people around him. There were still some who were wary, unsure if this peace would last. They had seen the destruction, the horrors of war, and now they were left with the question: could Earth defend itself again if the Empire returned? Ryu knew the answer, though he wasn't sure the people were ready to hear it. Earth could fight back, but it needed to be stronger. It needed more warriors like him, people who understood what it meant to protect their world, no matter the cost. Ryu paused in the center of the square, gazing up at the sky. The Empire's ships were gone, but their threat remained. He had been the last line of defense, the final protector of Earth, but he couldn't do it alone. Ryu's fight had been a personal one, but he realized now that the future of Earth depended on all of them. Every citizen, every government, every soldier. It was a collective responsibility. The victory had shown them what they were capable of, but it had also revealed their vulnerabilities. The Empire had come once. They would come again. From the distance, he saw a figure approach, a familiar face. It was Kaito, one of the allies Ryu had made during the chaos of the battle. Kaito had been instrumental in organizing the counterattack after the death of the Empire's commander. Though he had no combat training, his knowledge of technology and his ability to coordinate large-scale operations had saved countless lives. He was one of the new leaders of Earth, a symbol of the change that had begun. "You've done it," Kaito said, a tired but genuine smile on his face. "The world owes you more than words can express." Ryu nodded silently, but his gaze never left the sky. "The fight isn't over," he said quietly. "We've won a battle, but we haven't won the war." Kaito sighed, his expression turning serious. "I know, and we're preparing for that. But for now, people need hope. They need to believe that we can do this." "They will," Ryu said, turning to face Kaito. "But not because of me. It's because they've seen what they're capable of. When the Empire returns, we'll be ready. And this time, it won't just be me fighting. It will be all of us." Kaito gave him a long look before nodding. "Then we have time to prepare. We'll need every bit of it." Ryu's gaze turned back to the horizon. The sun was higher now, casting a warm glow over the city. The destruction had not been in vain. It had awakened something in the people of Earth, a realization that they were stronger than they had ever known. Ryu had fought alone for so long, but now, the world was no longer alone. Earth had found its strength, and they would stand united against any foe. As the days passed, the world began to rebuild. The military and civilian efforts merged, creating new technologies, new strategies, and a renewed sense of purpose. Earth had learned the hard way that survival required more than just physical strength. It required unity, resilience, and the willingness to fight for something greater than oneself. The people were not just waiting for the next invasion. They were preparing for it. They trained, they fortified, they adapted. The Empire may have had advanced technology, but Earth had something that the Empire could never replicate: the will to survive. Ryu had shown them that a single man could stand against the greatest power in the galaxy. Now, the people of Earth were preparing to stand together. As Ryu stood in the square, watching the people move about their day, he felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. His work was not yet done, but for the first time in a long while, he felt that the future of Earth was in good hands. The world had changed, yes, but it had changed for the better. Ryu had given everything to protect this planet, and now, the people would carry that legacy forward. The sun had fully risen, and with it came the promise of a new day, a new dawn for Earth. And as Ryu disappeared once again into the shadows, he knew that whatever came next, Earth would face it together. The battle might have been long, but Earth's story was just beginning.